right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. We've got a great group here in person, despite the rain. We've got some people online as well. If you're online, can you answer in the chat that you can hear us? Yes? Okay, perfect. Love it. All right, thank you guys all for coming to today's workshop. We're super excited to get started. Today we have myself. My name is Allie Trong. See if the clicker will cooperate with me. Doesn't want to, so sweet. Okay, now it's awake. Hi, my name is Allie Trong. I am the lead content coordinator here at SupplyPike. We do everything from ebooks to articles to today's workshop that you're on today. So thanks for attending. Leading today's workshop is the wonderful Tim Carey. He's the owner of Trend Results. He has 15 years plus experience working on helping suppliers train specifically on Retail Link. He's got lots of classes on Retail Link Fundamentals, 101, Nova, DSS, like we're going to cover today, and lots of other topics. So we're really happy you're here, and let's give Tim a little round of applause to get him started. All right, so before we get in today, I want to call out that if you've attended one of our webinars or one of our in-person events, it's going to look a little bit differently today because Tim has so much knowledge to share. We have him for 2 hours. So he's going to get into the nitty-gritty of DSS reports, and here's what the agenda is going to look like. So first we've got the intro to DSS, so kind of covering the basics. Then we're going to get into exploring the supplier scorecard, forecasting and supply chain. And then we've got lots of time for questions and getting into the nitty-gritty. So if you're online, please use the Q&A. We will be monitoring that, and I will be teeing those questions up to Tim. And if you're in person, just go ahead and raise your hand and Tim will answer your question. I've kind of started to cover the FAQs, but our design team works very hard to get you a recording of today's conversation. So that will be coming out in about 3 to 4 business days, as well as a PDF copy of today's slide deck. And like I said, if you're online, go ahead and use the Q&A tab on Zoom, and I'll be teeing up those questions off to the side if they're pertaining to the conversation, but we will also have a dedicated Q&A time. So get your questions in early because we know we have a lot to cover today. And then again, if you're in person, go ahead and raise your hand. And Tim, we've talked before, he likes an interactive crowd. So please, let's have a lively event. Okay, that's backwards. And then lastly, before I hand it off to Tim, if you aren't familiar with who SupplyPike is, we are a company that creates software, cloud-based tools that help retailers reduce their revenue loss by automatically detecting and resolving retailer compliance issues. Some of the ways we do that, since we're talking about Walmart today, is with AP deductions, with OTIF, and coming very soon with SQEP, the SQEP Supplier Quality Excellence Program. So with that, Tim, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is more of an informal thing than that. You don't have to clap for me. As she mentioned, I'm Tim Carey. I live in Dallas, but I have been working. I went to school at U of A up here years and years ago. I have lots of time up in Northwest Arkansas, so it's good to be kind of my second home. As she kind of mentioned, my company was started in 2007. Primarily as consulting and analytics before data and software started integrating and people could, download things and data visualization tools. This was old school Excel stuff. Around probably 7 or 8 years ago, I got into the training game, kind of like this stuff, but more comprehensive, full day classes, 2-day classes, things like that in person and online. Dealing primarily with Retail Link. Nowadays, some more Nova and Item 360, and as Walmart keeps adding more and more applications for you to learn. We've kind of aligned with some experts to take those courses. My primary focus is Retail Link and analytics side of things. So if you've been in decision support or somebody pointed you in that direction and said, hey, this is where you go. This is usually the way that training works is you get your new Retail Link login and somebody in your company says, okay, go to decision support and I need a sales report. And you get there and there's, 200 templates and 900 selections to make. So that's what my primary focus, especially today, is going to be. This is a 7 to 8 hour workshop. So it is significantly compressed. We are going to introduce decision support. I'm going to tell you about kind of the major reports that I use on a day-to-day basis. I know there's a lot of reports available. The 2 that I use or the 3 that I use, and then we're going to get into detail on one that is more aligned with speaking to in Walmart's language, which is a supplier scorecard. If you've seen that, it's kind of a hot mess of a document. There's data everywhere. So we're going to kind of break down what's important, why it's important, and kind of flip the switch analytically on why you should be thinking of data from Walmart's perspective, not necessarily from your perspective. Disclaimer, Walmart and my attorneys make me do this. We're not Walmart. Walmart isn't us. We are a third party. Walmart surprisingly doesn't do any training, formal training. They do have Academy online and that has some fantastic resources. It isn't really as in-depth as this. So we do, you'll see screenshots in here. You'll see references to Walmart and retailing. It isn't us. So I've said my piece there. Second thing that I say on my own, don't share your passwords, don't share your user IDs. It's the quickest way to get shut down. Your user ID, they're free, they're easy to get, they're easier now. They used to be like a 2 or 3 week process to get approved for one. Now it's pretty straightforward. It's confidential. Don't share your user IDs. If you're new to the company and someone says, well, just use theirs, they left, just use theirs. Just don't do that. Especially don't call retailing on behalf, like retailing tech support on behalf of someone else. They're going to ask you your name, user ID, PIN number. If it's not you're going to get logged out immediately. Now you have to go through the whole process again, set up all your DSS reports again. Like it's a punitive process. So just don't do that. Decision support, that's where we're going to start today. We're not getting into, exploring your dashboard, setting up business at a glance, going through the apps and docs. We're getting straight into the nitty-gritty here. If you've not been in here before, or if you have just been self-taught, hopefully today will kind of get you a mental approach to how to build any kind of report. And then we're going to have some examples as well. Decision support system. If you'll hear this abbreviated DSS, if you've had any kind of data shared with you, Excel documents, anything, even if it's a dashboard that has pretty graphs and stuff, likely the raw data came from decision support. There are some other places in retailing that can provide you with some data. This is the most comprehensive one. It's sort of necessarily complex. You can do so much with it. And I'm telling you, I've been working with Walmart between my own company and previously with other suppliers for over 20 years. Decision support has not changed that much. They've added new templates, but it's actually amazing how well this thing was designed over 20 years ago. It's still very robust, but it's kind of, again, necessarily complex. It's a reporting application. It does allow the user to create what are called custom database queries. Thankfully, you don't have to know SQL. You don't have to know any programming languages. It is all graphical user interface, but they're created using what they call templates or report wizards. So we're going to walk through the scorecard, but I'm going to show you how to kind of build any of them and getting you comfortable with kind of over the fear factor of, here's all of these options that are available. You're probably ever going to use 5% of them. So there is a lot to really kind of get out of your brain. You're probably never going to use it. And you can still get really powerful reports. You can also schedule reports. So once you get into retailing, and you've gone through the time of setting up your reports, you can say, here's my sales report and supply chain report, OTIF, all of this stuff. You can actually schedule these to run on Sunday or on Monday. I typically run them on Sunday. That way they're ready on Monday morning when they get to the office. If you do schedule them, we know that Walmart's week begins Saturday, right? Everybody knows that. Even though it begins Saturday, you would think that you could schedule a report to run on Saturday and you would still get last week's data. You can get it to run on Saturday, but when you're scheduling, you can't say the time. You can just say the date. And so if you say it Saturday, it might run at 12:01 Saturday Central Time. You still got 2 time zones of stores that are open. So run them on Sunday, let the data shake out on Saturday, and then you'll have a full year-to-date or previous week data. If you've been, I know that we don't have laptops. Usually in these workshops, they're very interactive. They're smaller classes. People are following along. You are going to get this presentation, a PDF, or I think it's a PDF, right? So you'll get all of this. That'll kind of help you walk through things. It is in the apps tab. One of the important things, just click on, if you see anything in that favor in the apps tab or docs tab, click on the little star icon by it. It'll add it to your homepage. So if you've been hunting around for an application or a document for 2 hours and you finally find it, just add it to your favorites, and it'll be right there on your homepage. Okay, like I mentioned, there are several dozen different what they call report templates. All of you're doing with these templates is you're creating a database query. Everybody's gone to Google or Bing and typed something in to search for something. You're creating a database query. You're just doing it, thankfully, in a very intuitive manner. That's all you're doing here. You don't have to know SQL. You don't have to know any kind of programming language, but mentally, that's what you're doing with these templates. So there are several dozen available. The 3 that I use the most, because they're very flexible, they can get you data about sales, inventory, store counts, returns, markdowns, anything you want to see just at different levels. So the company summary report gets you down to what we call item level. So you can see item specific data. You're looking at sales by item, inventory, store count by item. All of this stuff can be seen there. This is usually where I start from an analytics standpoint. I want to see, looking at something corporate wide, everything rolled up into one isn't really giving you anything actionable. It's when you start getting down into item level, that's when you can start to see, oh, I'm 82% in stock on this one. I need to know then where those stores are out of stock so that we can start doing do they have anything in the pipeline, some more granular research. That's where the store detail report comes in. You can drill down, it's the exact same data that's available, but down to store level. So you can imagine if you are in 4,500 stores, you have 200 items across some assortments, and you want to see a report that's by store by item, decision support will do it. You're going to get about 800,000 rows of data in Excel. Excel can handle it. Decision support can handle it. Some people are data hounds and just want everything. I've got my own, data visual, I got, whatever software we use, and it can import that. Some people just want one row of data. The important part is you can do that. You could get one row of data or 800,000 rows of data. The one that we're going to actually look into and show you how to build, give you the recipe for it, and then walk through this thing pretty much line by line is called the Supplier Scorecard. If you go to a line review, you're probably going to see the Supplier Scorecard. You need to be familiar with it. This is what Walmart calls a same page thinking document. The reason it's same page thinking is it's a preset report. The data that you see in column C12 is the exact same thing that your buyer's seeing in column in cell C12. So it allows them not only to be looking at the same document, but it's also looking at the data from their perspective. It's looking at not just, okay, the tendency is from a new supplier, you get your account, you get Retail Inc. access, and the first report everybody runs, I don't care who you are, the first report everybody runs is sales. I want to see how much I sold. This document is probably 65 rows of data. Sales is one row. That's it. So this is really getting you thinking about, okay, what is Walmart looking at when they're talking about the success, the score of my account? So sales is important, but it's one aspect of your overall business. So we're going to get into that. Don't be scared once I pull the screenshot up. We have blown it up. Allie kind of helped me put a screenshot together that blew it up because it was the whole page of these like little bitty numbers. Decision support query. I like to think of it, this is more of a mindset thing. It's a structured business question. This is all I want you to understand is it's a structured business question. What's a business question? What are the sales for my items? Okay. Think about this database as an intelligent 5-year-old. It can answer really complex questions. It understands you, but it needs very, very specific input. It needs to know, okay, what are the sales for my, what time range? Last 4 weeks, year to date? What level of detail? Do you want to see it by item, by store? Do you want to see sales quantity or sales dollars? So this is the part that really is going to help you mentally start creating more robust reports the first time, rather than running them and trying to create them 8 times and going, oh, well, I forgot I needed to add this and this. So it really does help the first time to just ask yourself the business question from the perspective of a database, a really intelligent 5-year-old. Does anybody have kids? I mean, you have to be very specific with what you ask. So in order to ask a question, you have to structure the question into a format using the steps that we're going to show here. And again, the first one I just talked about, form your business question. It seems intuitive and eventually will be intuitive. When you're new to this, write the questions down. Just write down specifically, I'm looking for the sales for the last 4 weeks. Sometimes you have to educate, if you're the analyst, sometimes you have to educate your boss or somebody higher up when they just send you an email and say, what are the sales for our item? Well, what's the time rate? Eventually, if you're doing your job as an analyst, you'll be teaching them how to ask the right question. That's the way, because all we're doing is with that question, then selecting the right template. If it has anything to do with by location, now you're getting into by store and then store detail type of stuff. Then there are different selections when we get into these, and I'm going to pull some screenshots up here in a second, but you're just making on each of these selections, you're being forced to say, to ask the 5-year-old specific, give it specific guidance. You can define this by columns. You can tell the Excel document, every selection I make is going to be a column in Excel. So if I want the item number to be, Walmart's item number to be column A, that's my first selection. Cost, retail, UPC, sales, inventory. So this is the really powerful part of it, is you can structure this thing to be anything you want. Your item selection is kind of defining the pool of data. So you might have 500 items under your vendor account, under your 6-digit vendor number, but it has been the account is so old that you're only selling 15 items to Walmart right now. You don't need a report that shows all 500 items. If you had your filter was just your 6-digit vendor number, you're going to get a pool of data like this, but you might only want one department. So your pool of data is down here. So you get these filters that allow you to go down to department level, one specific item, a group of items, maybe an item group or an assortment. So this is defining the pool of data by item. Certain templates have location selection, like the store detail we talked about. If you want to see store level stuff, this is where you're defining the pool of data by location. So you could have a report that just shows one store, one item. You could literally have one row of data that shows this item sold this much in this store last week. Not really going to tell you anything. Or you can get down to a specific group of stores. If you've had a promotion going on in stores, you can get down and see just a specific group of stores by state, by zip code. So there's a lot of information you can glean from this, but this is similar to the items tab where you're just defining your pool of data. Time selection, this one's handy. You can have up to 6 different time ranges. So you could have one report that showed year-over-year sales last week. That's 2 time ranges. Year-over-year sales last 13 weeks. Year to date, last 52 weeks. You can go up to 104 weeks in Retail Link or in decision support. You can get a little bit further than that if you kind of know what you're doing. The point there is you can go up to 104 weeks if you want your data longer than that. Just make sure you're saving it. So I usually, my structure organized on my site or my computer is 2023, week 1, week 2, week 3, just different folders for each one. That way you can build your own archive going backwards. Okay, we talked about report wizards and templates and decision support. When you get into decision support, this is what you're going to see on the homepage. The left side of this is going to be mostly blank. You've got 3 different selections here. It will default to new decision support, United States, and Walmart. There is still a selection here for Sam's Club, but it doesn't work anymore. Sam's goes through the third party through IRI called Madrid. Yeah, it's a whole different beast. If you are selling in multiple countries, to Canada, Mexico, anywhere Latin America, ASDA until very recently, you do have to make this selection. These templates are country specific. So as long as your user ID has access to the different countries, you can select those here. That is one of the things that people usually forget to do because you're logged into your US Retail Link account and your boss is asking a Canadian question. You go, there's a template called company summary, both in Canada and the US. But if you're selecting United States and you're typing in your Canadian vendor number or your Canadian item numbers, you're going to see no data found. So just make sure that this is correct here. Briefly speaking to country access, if your country is selling into a different country than the US and you need access to it, if you don't see a selection here, that means that your user ID doesn't have access to that. Your site administrator within your company can add that vendor number to your user ID. So these are all these templates that we're talking about. There are a dozen folders, and each one of these has a half dozen, a dozen, 2 dozen different templates in it. We're going to look at 3 today, and you'll be dangerous with those 3. You can get anything you want to see from the 3 that we're going to look at, but you can get into very specific reports about supply chain, about your scorecard, market basket reports. These are fascinating. We don't have enough time to talk about them today, but get the process for running any of these reports is the exact same. You're making your selections, you're hitting submit, and you're getting some data. So these are the templates that we're going to talk about. There is a recent little phenomena that showed up with Retail Link that some of these templates, I don't know why, have just disappeared. Like the store detail, company summary templates, some of them have just disappeared. So you go in here and you've been working with it for a long time and you look for store detail and it's not there. Go to this little search thing and click, or just it'll, I don't have it here, but it's just a little window. You can type in store detail. Or if that doesn't show up, you can type in one of the columns like store number, and it will give you a list of all of the templates that have that in there.
So you can go in and modify.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go in, you can get to it through my reports and your saved documents. That's right. But the blank one just will not, it's a known glitch. I don't know if there's a resolution date, but if you've been looking for something, don't panic. You can either go through my reports like she had talked about, or you can search for it here and it should show you that template. All right, speaking of my reports, we're going to talk about saving reports. The reports that we're building today, we're talking about saving the template, not saving the Excel document, the results. So when we talk about saving templates, you don't have to go create these reports every week. I've worked with other retailers where if you want a sales report, you got to go build it every week and then download it every week. You can build the report, get the format how you want it, get the time range, the column order, everything like that, and then save the template. It's going to show up here in my reports, and you're going to see a list of them here. You can name them, you can organize them. As far as managing them, like she had mentioned, you can see a store detail report here, and you could modify it, even if it is missing from your DSS homepage. Modify is this just, and I've got the kind of instructions here. If let's say you wanted to modify this .com summary report, you can just modify, right click and modify. It's going to open up that template with all of your saved selections. So you might need a report that only has last 4 weeks, but now you need it to be fiscal year to date. You don't have to rerun that report. You can just modify this, change one thing, and you've got a brand new report. Yeah.
And we have a question online.
Mhm.
Hi, for DSS, does the report work for those shipping as a drop ship vendor?
For the reports in DSS, no. Everything on, shipping to the store or shipping, we're talking DSV online or DSV to the store?
Could you answer both?
It's really cheating. That's 2 questions. So the DSV.com is going to be on your .com reports. Let me go back here. So you're going to see some Walmart.com reports here. Walmart did break these apart several years ago. I mean, this is a brick and mortar system. This was built for stores. And so all of the database is structured by store and by item by store. So they used to have just phantom store numbers that all of this .com data just got pushed into. So you really didn't get a lot of visibility. Your .com reports now, there is a sales report in there, and that does tell you the 4 different, it's omni-channel. So you'll see data in there from their Pick Up Today program. You'll see ship from Supplier. You'll see your you'll see the fulfillment center orders that were shipped directly from the fulfillment center. You can get down into net ships, which is sales minus cancellations minus returns, or you could see gross ships. So for the online business, the Walmart.com folder is going to be where you need to go. For the DSV, like ship directly to the, or DSD, shipping directly to the stores, you're going to still see that data in your company summary and store detail reports. So you'll be able, the only thing you won't see for DSD is any kind of DC level inventory. Everything just flows through, even if it is DCSD, DSCD, direct store through the DSDC, sorry. Even if it's, sometimes DSD supplier do go through center points, but for true DSD shipping direct to the store, you'll still see that data like in the store detail reports and things like that.
Sorry, for DSV vendor.
For dropship vendor. So dropship vendors, we're talking Walmart.com.
Yeah.
So we're talking, yeah, the omni-channel report is going to be in the, I think it's called a sales summary report. So just open this, you'll see sales summary report in there. Okay, so modify reports, submitting, deleting. Don't panic if you've right-clicked on this and you accidentally click delete. It's not on this screenshot, but there is a recycle bin up here. So if you do delete this, just go up to recycle bin. You can right click and restore it. Once you delete it from the recycle bin and empty that, it is truly gone though. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is the share option. If you are new in a role as the analyst, someone else has left or moved on to a different role, they've built these 24 different reports and you don't want to have to rebuild them. They can share these templates with you. So they can go, it's basically like emailing it from their my reports to your my reports. You can actually share these across suppliers. So if you're at this meeting here and you're networking, you could share a template. All you need is that person's user ID. You don't need their password. Don't give anybody your password. You don't need their password. It is the user ID. So it's not we used to log in with the user ID, which used to be like your first 3 digits of your vendor name and some numbers. Now it's all email based, but you still do have a user ID. We're not on that page right now, but if you don't know your user ID from the retailing homepage, there's that little profile icon up here, and you can see my user information. It'll show you your actual 6 or 7 digit user ID. All they need to do is type that in there. So let's say we're in a class and there's 2 people with different suppliers and you have a report that you guys are networking afterwards and I've run that report. Like if it's a DSV, I've run that report before. What's your user ID? I can share that with you. If yours is set up to pull information for your 6-digit vendor ID and you share it, say with you'll see the report. But when you run it, if you don't make any changes, it's just going to say no data found. It's not sharing access to your vendor. It's just sharing the template. So it's kind of like emailing it directly from your my reports to your my reports. So you'll still have to modify that, change the vendor information, and you'll then own that report. So it's not going to change your version. Okay, let's get into this real quick. I feel like I'm used to these classes lasting 8 hours. So, okay, we're only 30 minutes. We're not doing too bad. DSS templates, we've talked about the templates and the report wizards and all of these different options. This is what I'm talking about. When you're building this graphical user interface, all of these selections you're making a database query. You've typed something into Google before, that's a database query. That's all we're doing here, but it is all graphical user. So every selection, every option you make up here is going to help you refine your question, remember, to the 5-year-old. The first selection you're going to make and all of the templates are slightly different, but the procedure is the same. Your column selection is defining the column order. So every selection you make here is going to be a column in Excel. You'll notice that there are dozens of folders. There are dozens of subfolders. Some of these have subfolders. Some of them have 24 different report columns. You'll probably ever touch 5% of these. You don't need to know it all. Just understand it's in here. So if your buyer says, I need this, or your replenishment manager says this, I need this. If you know the column name, you can search for it and it'll show you what folder it's in. So that does help. One thing that's a little hidden that not a lot of people know about is this definitions. Most of the columns do have a definition, so you can right click on it and put it here. I had a 15-hour flight to Beijing one time, and I was just bored and went through and made a PDF but it was too big to actually share online. It was every one of these things trying to make a resource for it. Easiest way, if you don't know what something is, just right click on it. Most of them have a definition. Sometimes the definition is more confusing than the actual column name, but this can really help you understand what we're talking about. So again, the columns are the order that you receive. So prime item number in this selection is going to be column A, column B, column C. It's off the screenshot here, but there are some buttons and you can drag and drop these, move them out. You can clear it if you've accidentally deleted one. There's also a calculate button that allows you to do some basic arithmetic functions. So if you wanted to see units per store, and you had current on-hand quantity and you had POS quantity, you could do a very, very rudimentary calculation. You're not going to get into Excel like VLOOKUP and stuff like this, but you can add two columns together and have that as a third column. Kind of helps you maybe in Excel, or if you're just instantly wanting to share a report because it already has some of those arithmetic calculations done. The items tab, we talked about this being the pool of data. You're defining how much data you want to assess, whether that's one item, a group of items, everything under your vendor number. The whole thing depends on you. I personally prefer to get everything under my 6-digit vendor number pulled into one report. Excel is powerful, VLOOKUPs are powerful, index, match, offset, all of those things can grab whatever you need publicly and put it in a sheet. I just have hidden sheets full of mountains of data and I'll pull what I need. By selecting vendor number, it makes it kind of future proof. So if you have a new item, let's say you had a report that only had your current active items in it, and now you get a new item. Well, you got to go and rebuild that report, add the new items, remove the old items. With vendor number 6-digit, you can pull in everything. And as you get new items, it's automatically going to pull in there. Then you only have to just modify the public part of your spreadsheet, pull in the new items, remove the old ones. So that's what I would recommend. Some people want a very specific output from decision support. Some people want just kind of the kitchen sink type of stuff. There are a lot of options here. Just understand that this is defining the pool of data, how much information I want to see. Locations, not all templates have locations. We talked about the store detail. If your business question that you've asked has anything to do with locations, what are my sales in Arkansas? Or we had a promotion in these 3 states, and I need to see the totals for those by state or by store, then you're going to be in the store detail template, which has locations. This is similar to the items tab. You're defining a pool of data, but you're doing it by location. So you're saying, I want to see everything in this state, or I want to see all stores. There is an option now on here. Remember, I talked about there used to be phantom stores to handle the .com stuff. There is an option when you get into the store filters, and there's an option for all stores. There's also an option for all stores without .com. Select the without .com one, because we now have dedicated reports for .com. If you select all stores and don't remove the .com business, you're going to see one store that is just phenomenal because it's outpacing everything. It's basically all your online sales being reported on one. So allstores.com will just get you, or without.com will get you your brick and mortar business basically. Time ranges, we talked about, we have 6 different time ranges. You can select any way that you want to do it. Some people like to see POS date because that allows, you might have your own specific internal dates. Walmart's calendar can get a little funky. So sometimes people want to see specific date ranges. Where I use the most here is fuzzy dates. What is a fuzzy date? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Think of it as a relative date. It's relative to when you're running the report. You have time ranges in here like last 4 weeks, fiscal year to date, last 52 weeks. If they didn't have fuzzy dates, like last 4 weeks, every week you would have to log in and add the last 4 weeks or modify the last 4 weeks. So fuzzy dates is no matter when you run the report, it's relative to that date. So last 4 weeks, this is where I'm in the most because that's really what people are wanting to see is these time ranges from today. Finally, we're into, sorry,
I
yeah.
just wanted to add the next thing about the fuzzy dates is it does the math for you if you do last 4 weeks,
Yep.
and then you compare it to last 4 weeks more easily. And
Yep.
so sometimes you can mess that up because Walmart weeks are weird. So if the fuzzy dates are in there, it calculates it correctly.
Yeah, and what I'm just going to kind of repeat this for the online folks. What she was mentioning is last four weeks or the fuzzy dates takes care of these anomalies that you run into with Walmart's calendar from time to time, where you do have sometimes a 53-week year, sometimes, since everything is lined up by week number and not by just calendar day, that last 4 weeks will actually kind of take care of that for you. So you don't have to worry about, oh, well, that last year was a 53-week year. This year is a 52-week year. It will take care of that all for you. As opposed to if you got into like Walmart week, I'm looking at the microphone, like everybody can see me. Instead of going like Walmart week or Walmart month, the fuzzy dates is where I would go, because it does take care of all those kind of time anomalies. Supplier scorecard. We're going to slow down a little bit here and talk about building this report, the recipe to build this report, and really go into what it is. This is this same page thinking document. This at your account from Walmart's eyes. So this is sometimes completely different than how you're looking at your data, but it's important to understand not only what they're looking at, but why they're looking at it. Why are they thinking about your account this way? The report path, I remember when we were on the decision support homepage, when I talk about all of these PDFs that you get will have a report path. These are the templates. So when I'm saying report path, scorecards and summaries, then there's a template in there for scorecard or for supplier performance scorecard. Okay. Oh, one topical thing about the supplier scorecard, since we're in week 4 right now. One of the column groups in here is year to date, that shows year to date stuff. Once you're in week 1 of the calendar year and you run a supplier scorecard, you're getting year to date through the previous Saturday. You're missing the previous 52 weeks. And so there's no way from the regular supplier performance scorecard to get a true year over year. Like, you have to wait until week 1 to get year to date, but now year to date is only a day or 2. There is another scorecard in here that I believe it's weeks 1 to 9. It used to be only available weeks 1 to 9, and it was called Supplier Scorecard Year Over Year. It's in that same folder. It's in this same folder, but it's called Supplier Scorecard Year Over Year. Get in the habit of running this like week 1 or 2, something like that, because it won't be available afterwards. But what this will show you is all of last year versus all of the year before. So you can then see a full, otherwise, if they didn't have that, the only way you could get a almost complete picture is that week 52 will show you everything but the 52nd week. So get in the habit of using that so that you can then see year over year supplier scorecard. Okay. Quick into how to build it. And I've got, this is kind of a report recipe. You know, I showed you those templates and the items and locations. This is an easy one. It's there's no columns to select, no time ranges, no locations. All you're doing is putting a filter in here. If you're in one department, one buyer, 6-digit vendor number is going to work fine. But if you're in multiple buyers, or multiple departments, this needs to be department specific. Your scorecard, when you go to a buyer meeting, they don't care about what's happening under another buyer's items. So be sure with your filter here, the results are going to look the exact same. You can actually drill all the way down to item number. So you can see a scorecard for one specific item, one department. So just keep that in mind when you're going in to see whoever you're sharing this with, that it's from their eyes, not from your total global business. So you're literally just entering that, clicking is one of, you're going to enter that 6-digit vendor number. This is the kind of not intuitive part. You're clicking this and button. There's an or button there as well. You're getting into some pretty complex stuff if you're doing the or button. The reason for this is you can have multiple, remember we're talking to a database here. And so if you've ever done any database programming, it's like, show me this, where this is that, and this is that, or this is that. That's what these are, just conditions. They're operators. So the and button, it's unfortunate, even if you only have one filter, that you have to also click and. The reason it's there is because you could say vendor number 6-digit and department number is this, or the vendor number is this. So you can get into complex stuff. Unfortunately, even if you only have one filter, you have to click the and button. This is where people get user errors the most, is when they forget to click this. The system used to not let you submit the report, run the report, unless you had done that, but it will let you do it now. and run the report and give you a user error. And this is probably when we're in our classes and people start running these reports, this is the number one reason for user error, is forgetting that and button. And after that, you're naming the report, clicking run now and saving it. On that submit tab, there is a schedule option as well, where you can then go and schedule this to run on Sundays. It's pretty straightforward. I don't have the time in this 2-hour thing to go through the actual screenshots of everything. You will have this in the PDF. You'll also have my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Allie, or someone can get you in touch with someone who can answer your questions once you get into and to start building these reports. What's on the scorecard? It's not just looking at, remember, your first thing that all suppliers look at is sales. How much is Walmart selling of my items? Of course, it's important, but it's one row. I'm gonna scare you real quick, and I'm gonna go forward. This is the scorecard. This is the entire scorecard. It's a hot mess of data, and there is one row for sales. That's it, of this whole thing. One row of data. This is how Walmart, though, is assessing all of these key performance indicators to get down to what they would call your score. You don't have something called a score. It's not like a 92. If there is a score, it's this GMROI line, and I've gotten this blown up a little bit more, but I want to go through the key performance indicators, the kind of groupings of all of this data. The first one is sales, and it is important. They want to sell as much as possible of your item. But what if they're only selling it because it's marked down so much, because nobody was buying it at the higher price? Well, now Walmart's not making a profit. They're not making a margin, which definitely will be a topic of conversation in your next line review. So the first one is important. How much of your product are Walmart consumers purchasing? When we talk about sales in Retail Link, we're talking about consumer purchases. We're not talking about your sales to Walmart. Those are called ships, not sales. Profitability, so measurements is a group of measurements relating to how much money Walmart made, both gross, initial margin down to net margin. GMROI is figured into there. And it's not how much money the consumer gave them. It's the second, and I think arguably the most important one. These two together, everybody's heard, I mean, this is retail math. This isn't Walmart proprietary stuff. Sales and profit, you're talking gross profit. You're talking gross margin dollars. How many dollars in gross margin did Walmart make when the consumer purchased it? This could be a great number, but if this is 1%, that great number is not a lot anymore. They've invested quite a bit of time, energy, resources to make 1%. You're not going to be too happy with that. So sales and margin, or sales and profitability, are the first two. The third one is a little bit harder to define. It's called asset efficiency. You guys have, whether formally or informally in your company, you have a scorecard. You pay attention to these metrics as well. You want to sell as much as possible. You want to make a profit, and you want to do it efficiently. You don't want to import everything, get it from your factory, keep it in your warehouse for 16 weeks before you sell it to Walmart. You would like to have this kind of just-in-time conveyor belt from your production line all the way to Walmart. That's asset efficiency. It's a group of metrics that define how efficiently Walmart is handling their assets, which is your inventory. So you might have two different suppliers that are selling the exact same amount of some competing items, the exact same amount at the exact same profit, but one of them is doing it in making that profitable sale in 2 weeks. The other one is 10 weeks. This is the 2 weeks is what they prefer. So they're talking about balancing, and the metrics there are like unit turns, retail turns, in stock, weeks of supply. These are all the things that help measure how efficiently they're handling your assets. All of these work together in some very rough and tough math that's called GMROI. Everybody heard this before? It stands for gross margin return on inventory investment. It's a mouthful. Gross margin, sales and profitability. Return on inventory investment are these metrics. How much inventory did they have to carry on average for the year to make that profitable sale? Since it's in the bottom of the equation, since inventory is in the bottom of the equation, the higher that number is, the lower your GMROI is, the lower the gross margin return on their investment if they had to tie more money into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like your point about profitability being kind of the most important, in your opinion, kind of the most important factor in that process. And how the GMROI is calculated, is that also part of that calculation where profitability is kind of privileged over the other two?
Uh,
Or is it kind of
It's
like
not privileged mathematically. It's not privileged. It's gross margin is sales times profitability. The profitability that's considered in here is called maintain margin. So the question, sorry, I keep forgetting I've got 100 people online. Okay, the question, if you didn't hear online, he was thankfully and he was agreeing with me on how important profitability is in the overall scheme of things. Walmart needs to make money. The question was, when we get down to Jim Roy, is margin weighted more heavily mathematically in this equation? It is not. It's gross margin is sales times maintain or times their margin. The metric that's used in margin, and we'll see that when we get to the scorecard, is called maintain margin, and it's the margin after markdowns. So it's the margin they made when they sold it, not your initial margin where you're supposed to be selling it for the full retail minus your cost. That's your initial margin. Your maintain margin is when the consumer bought it. Let's say the store had marked it down 5%. That's the maintain margin that goes into here. So it's mathematically, it's just a multiplier. It's sales times gross margin. When I say most important, I'm thinking of that. There's a tendency with suppliers not to worry about markdowns because you're not doing anything, it's not coming back to bite you. You don't have any kind of price protection with them unless it's a formal type of rollback type of program. It's going to come up in a line review, even though you're not being asked, hey, part of your supplier agreement is to help us out with markdown money. It's going to come up. And so it is important for people to not just be looking at sales, but what's the contributor? Most of the time, sometimes items are just lower margin items, and it's more of a category type of thing. But some of them, if you have an initial margin of 45% and you're looking at your maintain margin and it's down in the single digits, that's going to come up. You need to have a reason to know that. So profitability is the one that I keep an eye on the most, but to quickly answer or not quickly answer your question, it's not weighted more. It's not like margin squared or anything like that. So the top of that equation, GM, is sales times profitability. The bottom is return on inventory investment. And that's kind of a fuzzy math. It's the annualized cost of your store inventory. So how much did it cost Walmart on an annualized basis to keep that inventory? So that's how much money do they have tied up into that? So you can see if this is a bigger number, it's in a denominator of that equation, their Jim Roy is going to come down. So you might have two items that sell the same, have the same profitability, but the amount of inventory that Walmart carried on one, they purchased too much of it at the beginning of the season, or it didn't sell as well, even though it sold at a high margin. They're left with a bunch of leftover inventory at the end of the season or the end of the end of the modular, and so they're not making as much money per unit of dollars that they had to tie up. An easy way, it's total hyperbole, but it's an easy way to define what Jim Roy is intuitively. You go to every Walmart store, you have 4,500 employees working for your company, and one of them goes to every store and camps out for 24 hours a day. And every time a consumer wants one of your products, you hand it to them. And then Walmart issues the purchase order and buys it from you. That makes the bottom of that equation infinite because the consumer's already bought it by the time Walmart buys it. That's what a turn and Jim Roy, that's one of these infinite things. Obviously, that's impossible. And so they're trying to balance. Everybody knows you get the emails weekly about your in-stocks are low, your in-stocks are low, your in-stocks are low, or the converse to that, your weeks of supply are too high. That's what they're trying. That's that bracket, 2 to 3 weeks of supply, 98% in stock. It's like the Goldilocks inventory. So that's the quickest way to kind of intuitively define what Jim Roy is nobody wants to keep inventory, but they kind of have to in order to make a profitable sale. So again, when you get the document, this is what it's going to look. Everybody's document is going to look the exact same, but only the data is going to be different. I have a much more blown up version of this with the most important parts. It's basically divided up into column groups. You got month, year to date, month to date, last week, going forward on the quarters. This will make a lot more sense blown up. But this is all it's doing is dividing it up into the metrics. The reason it's called same page thinking is that you've got all of this stuff, and so does Walmart. They're seeing the exact same data. blown up a little bit more. The only thing I did is get rid of the quarterly time ranges here. The two that I look at the most, these column groups divided up by the vertical borders, you'll see last week, and you'll see some numbers in there in parentheses. These are the week numbers, 4-digit year, 2-digit week. So you'll see the week numbers that it's corresponding to. Month is confusing. It's not the last 4 weeks. It's not the calendar month. It's the Walmart current month to date. So the first month or the first week of every month, you'll actually see this data will be the same because you're in 1 week into the month. The second one, this will be progressive. You'll see 2 dates. You can tell which week you're in or how far you're into the month by the numbers. You'll see like week 10 to week 12. That'll tell you how many months you're in, or weeks into the month. And the last one's year to date. The scorecard, you can run any day of the week and it's going to give you the same data. It updates on Saturday. So this is always going to be, no matter when you run it, it's going to be as of the previous Friday. So you can run it on Saturday, year to date. And like your fuzzy dates reports, year to date is always as of last night. The scorecard is going to be through the previous Friday. So if you're trying to match up year to date sales versus year to date that you're seeing in another DSS report, they're going to be slightly different if you're not running them on the exact same day. So the most important, let me get this. The most important metrics, not all of you are going to see data in all of these. If you are not a warehouse supplier, meaning Walmart doesn't keep your inventory in their physical DCs, you won't see anything in these under these warehouse columns or rows. If you're an assembly supplier, which means you just flow through the DCs, Walmart never owns that. The DCs never own that. They're just taking it off of one truck, putting it on another. So then in those cases, you wouldn't see this stuff. Under store, you'll see 1 row of data for sales. This is all dollars. You don't see POS quantity in here. You see dollars and percents. This is all about return. How much money are we making? Sales, comp sales, average price. The reason they have average price on here is because you can run this scorecard at item level. So you could see the average price that this was selling at is a lot lower than what we're actually the unit retail is. When we start getting further down, you'll see that this doesn't have anything to do with sales. This is all about inventory management, margins, retail dollar inventory. What this means is the average retail cost of the inventory that Walmart carried, whether it's last week, month to date, or year to date. So this is when we start getting into Jim Roy, and I'm talking about the cost of inventory. We've got the retail version of it, how much that inventory is worth, and the cost dollar inventory. Cost means how much money does Walmart have tied up in that? How much have they paid for that inventory? Ideally, they would like to place a purchase order from you, get the product delivered to the stores, sell it to the consumer, and pay you out of the profit. That's the ideal situation. And that's why weeks of supply and in stock are so important to them, because they don't want to have a lot of money tied up into this. You guys are the exact same. Nobody likes inventory, but you have to have it. So cost dollar inventory is what we're talking about. Cost on order. We get into these 3 in stocks. I wish they would just get rid of the 2 formally now. You'll see in stock, replenishment in stock, and CUST, which stands for customer in stock. In stock percentage is simply, is there 1 unit at the stores? It's sort of a meaningless metric. Just because a store has 1 unit, in my opinion, it's not in stock if they usually sell 10 units a day. So what replenishment in stock does is say the store, according to forecast, is supposed to have this many units on hand. It's supposed to sell this many units on hand, and it does or does not have them. So if you see 98.49% replenishment in stock or in stock, that means that 98% of the stores have at least 1 unit on hand. That's it. But you'll see replenishment in stock is 97.79. That means 97% of the stores have enough inventory to actually meet the forecast. So it's important when you start getting into your reports. Replenishment in stock is, even though you might hear it referred to as just somebody says it's in stock, that's the one. Customer in stock it's pretty vague. You have things that are called valid stores, which are stores that are actively replenishing your product. And stores that have the capability to turn replenishment off, they can say, I don't want it anymore. We don't need it. It's seasonal, and we ended our season before somebody else, another store. So customer in stock looks at those stores that are invalid. They still have inventory. The customer doesn't know whether it's a valid or invalid store. So this, from a customer's perspective, they're still valid. Replenishment in stock is only looking at current stores that are actively replenishing. Unit turns and retail turns. We talked about GMROI, gross margin return on inventory investment. A turn is just the sales and inventory portion of that. It's looking at the ratio of sales to inventory. How much did we sell per unit of inventory that we had to carry? General rule is the higher the better, right? But if you see really high turns here, the first thing I would check is in stock, because none of these items live in a vacuum. You have really high turns, which means, wow, we're selling a lot per unit of inventory. Well, you look up here and you go, oh, well, we're at 50% in stock. No wonder turns are high, because it's math. The inventory is so low that it's making another metric look really good, even though one is bad. So none of these numbers live in a vacuum. You need to be considering all of those. Meet your targets for in stock, meet your targets for weeks of supply. After that, the rest of these are kind of the results of that. We do have store weeks on hand. These are forecasted weeks on hand. So it does beg the question, is the forecast accurate? You know, you do have some different questions there. Ships at retail, ships at cost. Get into initial margin, which is the Walmart's potential profit, retail minus cost divided by retail. Maintain margin. This is the one that was in GMROI. Yeah.
So on store weeks on hand, what's the time frame that they're using to calculate that?
For the forecast? That's a good question. I have no idea. From when I don't use this from the scorecard. I calculate this on an item level basis. It's on the scorecard because you can run this for a specific item. When I'm looking at weeks on hand, I like to look at it both history based and forecast based. So I'll look at it last 4 weeks sales, and then I'll look at it based on the next 4 weeks forecast, especially if you have really seasonal items. You know, you might have 1 week of supply looking forward because you're about to come into a season, but you have 2,000 weeks of supply the last 4 weeks because you had to get the inventory in earlier. Did I repeat that question? Did everybody hear that online? Okay. She was asking how is the on store weeks on hand, she was asking what since I said it was forecast based, she was asking what is the time range on the forecast. The quick answer is I have no idea. This is a black box document. We didn't put time range in or anything like that. I don't use the scorecard to determine weeks on hand. I'm looking at an actual calculation of how much inventory we have versus last 4 weeks average sales per week, and also which is called history-based weeks of supply, and also looking forward 4 weeks, which is called forecast-based weeks of supply. It's important to look at both of them, unless you have just a really static item that sells about the same amount every week. There can be a big difference between the last 4 weeks on hand, and the next 4 weeks on hand. Okay, maintain margin. Remember, this is the one that goes into GMROI. This is the margin remaining after markdowns. Is it really 9:30? Okay. I gotta move. I gotta get moving. Maintain margin is the margin remaining after markdowns. So that is any markdowns that they have at store level. Some of them are corporate markdowns, end of season logic, end of life logic, things like that. But stores have a lot of latitude. They have a lot of latitude. They can turn replenishment off for your items. They can mark stuff down. The overall goal is because the stores know their business much more intimately than Bentonville does. And so Bentonville recognized, okay, we need to let them manage their business to a certain aspect. So they can mark stuff down. They can turn off replenishment. It gives them a lot more micro control over their local business. But that's what impacts maintain margin. So when you come down to GMROI, gross margin, that's the margin we're talking about is maintain margin. Don't get too bogged down with net maintain margin dollars and percents. This is some pretty funky math. From your perspective, GMROI, this is where you need to be concerned because that's an indicator of high or low markdowns, which could be a problem. And finally, GMROI. This is where we're getting if there is a score on this report, it is GMROI. Gross margin, which is sales times your cost dollar inventory. Sales times your maintain margin. That's your gross margin. The bottom of that is your return on inventory investment, cost dollar inventory. How much money did Walmart have tied up in this inventory? So that you won't be able to calculate that exactly because cost dollar inventory isn't annualized. So especially if you're 4 weeks in, they're annualizing that. inventory. So you won't be able to just go, okay, that times that divided by that and get the same number. Think of the relationship more than anything. The last thing you want to do is just go 1.99. What does that mean? Well, I don't know what it means. You can see in this example, it's down 0.17. This is a dimensionless metric. It's dollars divided by dollars. So what's 0.17 mean? Those are basis points. So it's you're down, your return on your investment is down 0.17. What does that mean? How do you explain something being down? Like in this example, well, it's sales times margin times asset or divided by asset efficiency. So you go up to sales. Well, sales are down 4% year to date. Okay, well, that doesn't equate to 0.17. Cost dollar inventory is up 2%. So that's 2 strikes. You got sales that are down and inventory is up. Maintain margin is down 1%. So there you go. Now you've got the 3 strikes. You've got lower sales, higher inventory, and lower maintain margin. So that's why you're seeing negative on this. So it's not really about what this number is, it's why it's what it is. Yep. It looked like a pre-question face. No?
Well, what's the like wiggle room, I guess, for that? Or does that change completely based on business? Every
category has different targets. I like to not concentrate on what this is. I like to concentrate on what goes into it. You ultimately have very little control how much consumers going to want to buy of your product. You have some price controls, you have some, some packaging and incentives types of stuff. But ultimately the consumer is going to do what they're going to do. You do have control over inventory. You absolutely have control over inventory. And it's important to kind of double check if you get some large anomalous order to make sure that they have the systems and the demand coming up to support that. They're depending on you looking at this data and telling your replenishment. I don't think I don't think this is enough, which is the common conversation. You need to order more. Or the more difficult internal conversation is to say, I think we need to tell them not to order as much. That's a much more difficult conversation to have. But that's why. If this was up 30%, then your GMROI is terrible. Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a seasonal item, when do you think is the best time to evaluate GMROI? Like post-season, like close to?
Or to evaluate GMROI, definitely post-season. Like if you had a summer seasonal item and you looked at GMROI the first week of that season, it's going to be abysmal because you had to get all that inventory, especially if it's a short season, you had to get all that inventory in up front. And so the bottom of that equation is just huge. You haven't started. Yes, your margins are probably going to be better at the beginning because they haven't started their end of season logic. But yeah, I would look at it at the end, maybe midway through. It depends on, if you're, let's say you've got a 10-week season and you've gotten all the inventory in up front. So you're not doing kind of a ladder plan type of flow into the stores. You're going to have no control over it anyway. You're getting the inventory in and it's going to sell. I like to I look at the scorecard weekly. I like to see, how things are trending. But especially really short seasons, there's not a whole lot you can do. If it's more of an extended season, like a 6-month season, there might be opportunities, halfway or a third of the way through to say, we need more orders. So we need something to support Labor Day or, our exit, because otherwise we're going to run out of inventory, with 2 months left in our season. So I wouldn't wait until the end, but as far as judging whether a season was successful, definitely the end of it. You just keep in mind that at the end of the season, you're going to have the influence of markdowns because they just happen. Hopefully they don't happen, but if you're selling Easter eggs the day after Easter, it's a fire sale. You're not going to sell a lot of them at full margin. So that is that. There, I purposely had Ali cut off everything below the screen here. There are a lot more rows on here under something called vendor summary, and it has these really enticing column names or row names like MABD compliance and replenishment fill rate compliance. We all know about OTIF. I have no idea where this data is coming from anymore. Sometimes you'll get a template shared by a buyer or replenishment manager that's asking you to pull this data from the scorecard. That's an educational moment for you. This data is not accurate. It's not accurate. OTIF, your on-time in full scorecard is where you're getting the most accurate information on fill rate, on-time delivery rate, and a combination of those two OTIF. So everything under there, just disregard it. Okay. How are we doing?
You're doing great.
940? Yeah. Nice. Okay, replenishment overview. We're going to get into still some reports and the basic, bless you, and how to run these reports, the recipe, but really more into what Walmart is looking at and the type of documents that they're providing you as a supplier to help with your planning. Does anybody do demand planning or forecasting replenishment in here? Okay, it's a dark art. It's a dark art. And so sometimes even the document you get, you have little faith in it, but it's better than not having a document at all. So sometimes you get a sales forecast and you're comparing that to actual sales and you're like, this is completely off. There are some disclaimers and ways that you can kind of work with the replenishment manager, or just say, I know it's always going to be 30% off. Hopefully there's no variation to it. So I know it's always going to be 30% off. At least I can adjust things on my end. But they do have another document that we're going to run, the store weekly forecast. This is what's going to give you insight into Walmart's consumer purchase forecast. This is what they're projecting the consumer is going to purchase from them. This is only replenishable stores. So if a store is it's traded to sell your item, if it's supposed to, but it's turned off replenishment, they're no longer in the forecast. That happens automatically. We talked about the report paths. Again, this is in the sales and margin folder and decision support, the store detail template. Again, I'm not going to, I have these recipes up here so that you can follow along when you get back. We're really only defining the item number and description. Some suppliers like to pull in their UPC or their stock number as well. That's in these same folder areas. That way you can map up Walmart's item number. Just get in the habit of always using their item number, at least including theirs, because when you share it with them, they don't know what your stock number is. They're going by their item number. Time across, data across, this is defining a time increment. So this is allowing you to see, instead of last 52 week sales, you could see last 52 week sales by week. So it allows you to see that kind of seasonality. In your store weekly forecast, there is a folder that just has all 52 weeks listed. Week 1, week 2, just drag your mouse down and it'll pull all of those in. That way you're going to have a future 52-week forecast. The document's a little confusing. I can't remember if I have no, I don't have one up here. The document's a little confusing because let's say like we're in week 4 right now and you run this document, you select weeks 1 through 52. It's not going to start at week 4. The first column you see is not going to be week 4 through 52 and then 1 through 3 at the end. It's going to say 1 through 52. You just have to know that I'm in week 4, which means everything 4 to 52 is forward. So is weeks 1 to 3. It's next year, weeks 1 to 3. There is no such thing as a historic forecast document. Unfortunately, I wish there was. We'll get into that when we talk about forecast accuracy. But there is no magic document that I've been wishing for 15 years that would say, let me see the forecast for the last 52 weeks by week. So that way I could go back and compare that to my historic sales and have more confidence in the forecast. So you have to keep your own archives of that. Again, this is the same thing. You're going through your item tabs. The one thing about forecasts that I like to do, especially for new items, if you're running a report at 6-digit vendor level for a new item that might not have been turned on yet or just was turned on, but they don't have any store level activity, there is an option on this items tab for activity level. You can say what's called combined activity. What that does is say, even if there wasn't any inventory or sales at a store, it's going to show up in this report. Because if you have a new item that you haven't shipped yet, the stores don't own any and they haven't sold any yet, it just won't show up in this report. So combined activity will enforce that item to show up in the report. It's just a little hiccup in their reporting system. The store, okay, I like to put this in here. Don't just hand this off to procurement. This is not a document that says, hey, Walmart's going to sell 2,000 units to their consumer this week. And so they need to order 2 weeks before 2,000 units. It'd be great if the world worked like that. It absolutely does not. This is a projection of consumer purchases. It is not a projection of Walmart. There's actually a summary in, there's a different document called a corporate POS forecast, and they have this statement in that document. Like, don't just hand this off, because people were waving it around going, hey, you said you're going to buy this. No, we said the consumer might buy this. There are a lot of reasons why they don't have to replenish just because a store sold the product. Forecast accuracy. Anybody familiar? You're part of demand planning, you know GRS. GRS stands for Global Replenishment Solution. It was the old system was called Inforum, was a similar, was a forecasting model. I liked it because it gave you a lot more hands-on, like they gave you the screwdriver and the wrench where you could, as a supplier, run a document called a detailed replenishment analysis, and it just showed you all of their little forecast settings, and you could send it back with all of your suggestions from deseasonalized demand, changing the indexes at stores, changing the safety stock. So GRS is more of a black box. You do have to work with your replenishment manager on making adjustments, but this is where you are pulling all of that forecast data from. It's a kind of a bottom to top solution. So they're looking at forecast by store. They're deseasonalizing it. They're looking back at the history of your items and saying, okay, this was an anomaly. This was an anomaly, smoothing out the data, building that up into a DC level forecast, which goes into a supplier total forecast. That's when you get and trickles back down to DC based on the proportion of DC sales. So the DC has 20 stores in it that sold this much. It's not like you're going to sell 100,000 or get an order for 100,000. It's going to go to all of your stores equally. They are going to get it. So the store level is where the forecast begins, trickles up to DC, trickles up to corporate, and then trickles back down to store level. So the orders that you get, if you're a DC supplier, are just a combination of all of those individual store orders that are rolled up into DC level. Forecast accuracy. I just got through saying the math is easy. The math is easy. It's forecasted quantity minus the actual sales divided by the actual sales. It's just a % difference. Forecasted quantity, in order to get actual sales, you're looking at last 4 weeks. The GRS logic has what they call a trailing 4 logic. And so they have their macro forecast, but they're looking at last 4 weeks sales versus forecast, and they're doing these kind of, that's where they're in with the fine tune. They're saying, okay, well, this wasn't as tight as we thought it was going to be last year or the last week, so we're going to make some adjustments. So the calculation is easy. Unfortunately, when I look at forecast accuracy, I'm going to look at last 4 weeks. How do we do against the forecast last 4 weeks? Pulling sales quantity for the last 4 weeks is easy, straight from decision support. There is no last 4 week forecast option. So you have to keep your own, like that store weekly forecast document that we created. That gives you 52 weeks rolling. So every week, when you've got your week 1 folder, your week 2 folder, now you can go back and reconstruct that document. So play around in Excel, get your own template going, but this is an important one because it's easy to just take the forecast document and say, okay, this is how much they think Walmart's going to purchase, but how accurate is it? You have to look. I mean, I've seen some very, very accurate forecasts. I've also seen some forecasts that are, especially for new items, that are really hard to nail down. If it's a new category of item, they don't have any sales history. So these can get out of control early. The sooner you can identify any kind of inaccuracies, the easier it is to work with your replenishment manager on making any adjustments. Caveat to working with your replenishment manager to make adjustments. Don't, if you see 30% under forecast to sales or over forecast to sales, don't contact your replenishment manager and say, hey, our forecast is inaccurate. That's their baby. That's their baby, and they will work with you on it. But if you've got 50% in stock, that's going to affect your actual sales quantity. Well, of course, your mathematical accuracy is wrong. So make sure you're doing your job first. Then you can work with replenishment manager on things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, so it's going off the last 4 weeks, but it's also very annualized. So if you have supply issues last year,
Yep.
that's a good reason to ask them for an adjustment. So just kind of keeping in mind what all the inputs, like just forecast accuracy recently is one thing,
Yep.
but also just making sure if you had that in stock this time last year,
Yeah.
really do the work of several weeks in advance.
Yeah.
So that you can get the right orders.
Yeah, and so the suggestion was, or the comment was about looking at sales history. The forecast is built off of sales history, which is a product of everything going on at the time, including in-stock issues, atypical events, weather, force majeure, any kind of thing that could impact sales. When they build the forecast, when GRES builds the forecast, it's looking at the last 52 weeks, it's looking at the sales history, last 104-week sales history, and it is making an attempt to deseasonalize things. So to make up for in-stock deficiencies, they have a calculation that they use that is I can't remember what they call it, sales quantity in stock cleansed or something like that. And basically it's rough and tough. They're saying we were 52% in stock. Our forecast said we were supposed to sell this much. So 1 minus 52 times their sales should give them what they would have sold, which gets them some rough and tough stuff. But yeah, it is a point where I like to look at last 52-week sales. And that's why I like to have last 52-week forecasts, lay over the two forecasts and see, oh, they didn't take into account this. So yeah, the sooner you can identify those anomalies, a lot of that should have been cleansed out, especially, force majeure type of events. Those are pretty easy to take care of. But yeah, you do sometimes have to remind them, hey, we had this promotion last year. That's why the sales were so high, or promotion was a month earlier last year. That's why there's this shift in there. Yeah, so there is when you get into demand planning, the first thing you want is data of any kind. And then you start vetting the data. What does this all mean? And does it make sense? And that's where you get into having to, unfortunately, have your own archive built rather than grabbing the data. But even when you see a forecast data, you need to vet that against, was that in-stock issue from last year, does it look like that was taken into account for this year's forecast? Okay.
I have a question online.
Yep.
This attendee says that the forecast seems to change daily. So should they pull the forecast every Monday or at the end of the week on Friday, or would it be better to take a weekly average after running the daily?
Yeah, you can get very easily paralysis by analysis. You can get way too close to this data. Technically, GRS updates on a weekly basis. Is this a DSV supplier?
It might. I don't think so.
Okay. Typically the GRS updates on a weekly basis. In fact, it's as granular as you can get on the store weekly forecast document. As you can't see you technically could see daily. To answer the question, Monday's fine. Monday's fine. If you're seeing dramatic changes, well, especially because your reaction time isn't daily anyway. You're likely, unless you're getting daily orders, you're likely getting weekly orders. If it's direct import, you're getting, probably quarterly orders. So I wouldn't, you can get way too close to this data. So just make your own, the demand planner here is nodding her head, like you can get way too close to this data. So monthly or weekly is fine. I wouldn't go any further out, less frequent than that though. So definitely on a weekly basis. All right. The data reduction is simple on this one. This is last 4 weeks forecast. This is the stuff you have to get, and I've got it noted up here. This is your historical documents. You can't go and pull this from Retail Link. So that store weekly forecast, you need to be pulling on a weekly basis. That way, when you can calculate this from your own archives, last 4 week forecast, we pull straight from decision support. And then we got the forecast here, the forecast accuracy. Walmart considers a forecast accurate within plus or minus 20% to last 4 week sales. So if your forecast if your sales to forecast ratios is within plus or minus 20%, they consider that accurate. There are some caveats there for very low volume items because, if you're supposed to sell 100 units and you sell 30 units, it's a lot lower of an impact. You're going to have for lower volume suppliers, you're going to have a lot harder time getting Walmart to kind of react and make proactive changes. They're running triage as well. They're dealing with since tribute to the Kellogg's building we're in, they're working on, these massive things that they need to correct because they cost them, hundreds of millions of dollars. So they need to be working on that first. It's still important that you are working on this and communicating with your buyer and replenishment manager about any changes that are needed. Okay, as we talked about this a little bit, you want to perform a sanity check on the data. We're getting a sales forecast, and we calculated a forecast accuracy. Yes, like you mentioned, yes, the forecast system GRS is supposed to have gone in and deseasonalized things. It's supposed to have taken into account any in-stock issues we had and tried to intuit what the gap would have been and fill in the blanks. But you still need to go and make those changes. If I saw a big dip in sales last week or last year for a certain month or 2 or 3 weeks, and I knew that corresponded to an in-stock dip, and I saw the forecast also do that, that's when you got to fill that blank in with the replenishment manager. Invalid stores have the ability to turn off replenishment for certain items. If they've been turned off, you don't have to worry about taking those stores out of the forecast. They are not included in the forecast once they are in invalid state. Okay, the supply plan. What was supposed to be the golden document that finally was a projection of Walmart's future orders. This was a beautiful document that suppliers have been asking for that was, hey, you're giving us the sales forecast, but that's all your reorders is based on inventory and pricing strategy and end of season logic and end of life logic. Is there a way that you could tell us a forecast of projected orders in the future? And they finally said, yes, this takes into consideration current and planned inventory levels, the consumer forecast, which we just talked about, any promotional events coming up, and an estimate of your product Walmart anticipates ordering in a couple of weeks, in the future weeks. The document is called a supply plan. It's straight out of decision support, just like everything else. Do a sanity check. If you've ever done a sanity check on a document from Retail Inc. in your life, do a sanity check on this. I've seen very accurate ones and I've seen very inaccurate ones. Just like any forecast, the further you go out, the more inaccurate it's going to be. So there is some reaction time constraints there. When I look at accuracies for either a sales forecast or a supply plan, demand forecast, I like to see consistencies. If I have an inaccuracy, I want it to be consistent. It's hard to troubleshoot if it's plus 20% off one week, then down 30%. Now you're just talking about kind of drawing a regression through the middle of it. So do an audit on this. Once you start looking at this report, it's as simple as saying, okay, 6 weeks from now, they said they're going to order 1,500 cases of this item. When it gets to that 6 weeks, make a note. How many did they actually order? And do that for, 6-7 weeks and calculate your own kind of internal document to calculate accuracy for this. So this is going to give us a projection of what Walmart expects you to order from you in the coming weeks. Just like my little disclaimer with the sales forecast, this is not a promise to buy. This is a projection of their orders, but it can be in conjunction with the sales forecast, a very powerful document. Easy one to run. This is, again, the recipe, the report path from Decision Supports in the supply chain folder. The very bottom of that, you'll see a report called the supply plan. It's just like building any other decision support report. You're going to put your prime item number. If you want to pull in your vendor stock number, you might want to for this, because a lot of times these are shared with logistics internally. So vendor stock number. The reason we're pulling vendor pack quantity in here is because the numbers that show up here are units. So since you guys operate in cases, we've got the vendor pack quantity. Then you're just pulling in the warehouse name, create date, order date, and receive date. These are the date that this plan was created, the projected order date, and the projected receive date. This is your MABD to the DCs and the number of units. So you're going to see by item, by warehouse, as many weeks as you've selected to go forward, how much they're planning on ordering on a certain week or day, when they need it, and how many units they're planning on ordering. It's a simple report to run. I like to run this at 6-digit vendor level. Just a note on that: if you have a vendor number that's less than 6 digits, you have to put a leading 0 in front of there. Run this on a weekly basis, just like the scorecard, just like your POS forecast. As far as the time ranges, there is no future equivalent of a fuzzy date. There is no next 52 weeks. So it is unfortunate. You do have to go in here in the future PO ship Walmart week or month. There's a month option as well. I like to see it weekly because most suppliers I work with get weekly orders. So you got future PO ship Walmart week, and just select as far out as it'll let you go. Usually I'll go in monthly and grab them, the more recent dates. Just keep in mind, the further you get out with this document, the more inaccurate it's going to be. But again, from a planning standpoint, more data is better than less data. So between this forecast accuracy, the POS forecast, POS sales forecast, and the supply plan, it can give you some very good insight into how much you need to have on hand to put together your ladder plan to make sure that you're filling orders when they say they're going to order them, so that when it gets down to GMROI and you've got that, you're dialed in on your inventory levels. You don't have too much, you have just enough, that kind of thing. So GMROI seems like an easy number until you get into this stuff, which is the hard part. The logistics of getting things from point A to point B at the right time, at the right cost, at the right place is very, very difficult. So that is your supply plan. The results, again, you're going to see your vendor pack quantity. The numbers that you see are units. So when they say 1,500, when you see 1,500, that's units that they're planning on ordering from you. But you're going to get orders for cases. So that's why we pull that vendor pack quantity in there, so that you can divide that and get number of cases they're planning on ordering. The date on which the supply plan was created, the date on which the order is projected to be transmitted to the supplier, and the projected MABD, which is the must arrive by date for the order, which is when they need it at the DCs, and the projected quantity of order in units. So you'll need to divide units by vendor pack to get actual cases that they're planning on ordering. What to do with it? Validate it. Review it to ensure everything looks as expected. Compare plan versus actual orders. Look forward and say 6 weeks from now, they're saying they're going to order this. So if you're just now starting to look at the supply plan, when you get back and you create this, don't just hand this off immediately to procurement as this biblical document. It might be, it might not. Do a 3 or 4 or 5 week analysis of it. Say, okay, next week they say they're going to order this. They only ordered 30% of that, or they ordered exactly what they said. Some of these are very accurate. Again, the further out you get, the more inaccurate any kind of projection tends to be. Are promotions reflected? That's the internal knowledge. If you know of something, a lot of times the demand planners are the last ones to know that we've got this promotion coming up. So just make sure you're on board with everybody in the account side of things to know that all holiday and seasonal impacts are reflected, especially sounds like you are a seasonal supplier, to make sure that the buildup is fine. Any supplier closings are reflected. Remember, this is an order document. So it's saying we're going to order this on this day. Every quarter, Walmart sends out the supplier closing template. You'll see it in your news section or your announcement sections in retailing. It's important to fill that out. That's you saying we're not going to be open on this day, especially if you have warehouses that are open 7 days a week, but you're not going to be open on a Monday for whatever reason. You need to, every quarter, you'll see that document. It'll show up right on your home. It's probably, I think it's still up there right now on the retailing homepage, because we're coming into their Q1 in February. So just make sure you're filling that out and submitting it as well. Use it to plan your internal sourcing, production, and shipping processes. Okay, but the most important one here is your audit. Improve, track it against actual orders to determine how reliable it is. OTIF performance, it needs to make sure that it's taking into account that, ensure alignment with all their promotions, seasonal events, and supplier impacts, and it can help. This will help improve your sales and forecast accuracy. So they're really tied together. As you start to fix your supply plan, now you're ensuring that Walmart has enough product that when the consumer needs to buy it, which helps them more accurately improve their sale, reflect what the consumer is going to purchase. We're here. We've kind of been doing this organically. That's how I like to work the classes anyway. So yeah, she's been fielding questions. We have a lot more people online than here because of the rain. But yeah, she's going to ask some questions. You guys feel free to as well. So let's go.
I'll start with the first one, and we have a lot of DS1 questions.
Okay.
Let's prepare you. Is the supply plan accessible for DSD suppliers?
No.
What would be the alternative?
Nothing. Yeah, the supply plan is warehouse based. So if you're shipping through warehouses, then yes, you would have that option. There is a store level sales forecast. You can drill down in the same document where I have the sales forecast, the POS forecast. You can add business unit information there and drill down by forecast or by store. But yeah, there's nothing we just got, even the DC level, we just got this one like a year or two ago. So the DSD folks, you got to kind of build your own plan there, unfortunately. But the logic's similar. The logic is, you start with a forecast of how much they think the consumer is going to purchase. You look at inventory loads, you look at any promotions. You're basically doing everything that the supply plan is doing somewhat automatically. And you're building your own demand planner that's saying, we need to have this much available to maintain 2 weeks of supply this week. So yeah, it's a little bit more hands-on, unfortunately, but yeah, the short answer is no.
Do you have any general tips for DSD suppliers when it comes to building reports or using retailing resources?
Store detail is your basically your only report. You're going to have to look at everything at store level. You can look at item level, but since you are shipping direct to stores, store level inventory, a store detail report that's showing you sales, sell through, ships, which is your ships into the stores from you. You can't get OTIF performance data for DSD. You can't, that's all DC stuff. But one thing that I would say for DSD reports, don't just look at store on hand, look at pipeline. There will be 4 in that store detail inventory template. There will be 4 selections. There's one for current store on hand quantity. There's one that's in transit, which as DSD, you won't see anything in there. There's one current in warehouse, which is that kind of, they've received it at the DC, but not sent it on to the stores. You're going to see blanks for in transit and in warehouse, but you will see on order. So you'll be able to look and say, okay, this store has replenishment in stock. Okay, I got to back up a little bit. We've talked about replenishment in stocks, like in the scorecard being like 82%, 78%, that kind of thing. At store level, you're going to see 100% or 0%. It's a binary question. Does this store have enough inventory to meet demand? Yes or no? Yes is 100%. No is 0%. The way they get to item level, the 82% is averaging up all those hundreds and zeros. So if, for instance, you see a store that is 0% in stock, it likely still has, you'll see some inventory. It might still have some inventory. If it's 0% in stock, I want to see something on order. For DC suppliers, you'll see like in transit and you'll see the full pipeline, but I want to make sure something is, like if I see 0% in stock, 2 units on hand, a forecast of 10 units a day and nothing on order, those are the stores you need to concentrate on. So DSD does have a lot more data to look at because it's a lot more of a manual type of process. But yeah, it is possible. Store detail is your friend on that one. Just make sure you're looking at total pipeline inventory, not just what's on hand. Okay.
I've got more questions coming in. If you're having issues with DSS, what is the best way to troubleshoot or reach out for help?
Depends on the issue. So when you run a report, you're going to get some different statuses. You're going to get done, hopefully. That's the one that means it's answered your question and it's ready to download. You'll get active, which is they're working on it. Waiting, they're working on it. User error, something you did, probably didn't press the and button, or you entered your item number where it was supposed to be, your vendor number. You'll have system errors. That's a DSS issue. Usually, if you have a system error, it's a temporary thing. Just resubmit the report and that'll clear out. So it kind of depends on what they mean by issues. If it's I didn't get what I was expecting from this report, send me an email. It's Tim. I think my contact information's in there. Send me an email. It's probably something I could build in 5 minutes and just share with your user ID or something like that. I do ask, and I say this to like my workshops that my company does. I do ask that you try. Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to ask you, like, what have you tried? Like, tell me exactly the issue you're having, because that's when you're going to learn. Is when you're just faced with a blank DSS template and you've got to click around. It's kind of, fail forward. So yeah, but you're not flying blind. You'll get this, which will help you. But yeah, we offer live webinars and in-person workshops. But as far as these one-off questions, reach out, no problem.
I've got one more question online.
Okay.
Is there a template for lost sales? If not, how would we build one?
There is a lost sales analysis report. Whoops. It has been a while. I think it is going way back here. I believe it's in the supply chain folder. There's a report literally called Lost Sales Analysis. It's an easy one to build. Basically, that's cleansed. There's some caveats to that, some disclaimers. It's basically saying we were 82% in stock and we were supposed to sell this much. Using some very rough math, we should have sold this much, so we lost this much. Obviously, that begs the question, is the forecast accurate? Like, that's assuming the forecast is absolutely accurate. So yeah, it's a good number to look at, but just keep an eye, just understand that you're basing math off of a forecast that might be inaccurate as well. Okay.
Anything you want to leave us with, Tim?
Play around in DSS. It's the easiest way to learn it is to make mistakes. I would start with the 3 that we talked about, the company summary. You can build some kitchen sink reports. If you have questions, reach out to me. I know you guys are pretty knowledgeable as well. And the SupplierWiki, that's where I would go. You guys have a ton of resources on there. You might see my picture on a couple of them. But yeah, play around with it. With DSS is where you're going to get most of your data. Don't get too close to it. Pick your battles. You're going to see some stores that don't have any. You're going to see 99.7% in stock, and you're going to go, what are the 3 stores that are not in stock, or out of 4,500? Pick your battles there. Kind of the 80-20 rule. Communicate with your buyer. This has nothing to do, it's a byproduct of decision support, but don't just use these documents internally. Some buyers, some replenishment managers have formal documentation that they like you to fill out, ladder plans or just their own summary template. Share this information with your buyer, even if they're not asking for anything. But don't just send them a spreadsheet and say, here's our update. They want bullet points. Here are the key points. Like what we do for our suppliers on a consulting side of our business is we harvest all this data, make sense of it, but our real product is just the email. It's the key points. Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. To that point, don't just communicate the good. If anything, leave out the good and just communicate the bad. That's the stuff they're difficult conversations, but they're a lot more difficult if the conversation is being initiated the other way. If Walmart is asking you what's going on. You know, you likely have a lot more insight into why there's an in-stock issue or a forecast issue or a fill rate OTIF issue than your buyer does. They're reacting. You need to be proactive and say, I'm monitoring OTIF every week. We're working with our carriers. We're trying to address these late or early deliveries. We've done a lead time audit. You know, we're proactive with this and communicate that. I guarantee you, even if it's in the back of their head when you get into the line reviews, if you've been the proactively communicative supplier, it goes a long way. It goes a long way. And ask them what's important to them. Ask them, you know, what are our targets for weeks of supply? What metrics do we need to be looking at the most for this category? Some categories are more markdown intensive, so you need to be worried about markdowns. Some categories, new products, you need to be looking at defective returns, you know, all of these indicators of a potential larger issue. So, yeah, I said a lot of things.
No, you're good. I was gonna close this out, but we've got one more question.
Yep.
If the fulfillment center is within the 20% acceptable window, but the fulfillment center calculated weekly turns versus a 4-week and a 13-week calculated POS unit returns, would you like to read this?
Yeah, that was, I'm a fairly smart person, but that was a lot. If the FC, okay, if the fulfillment center is within the 20% acceptable window, but the fulfillment center calculated weekly turns versus 4-week and 13-week calculated, I still don't know what this is asked. Calculated POS unit turns reflect a substantial difference is a forecast adjustment or a fulfillment center. Wait, are we talking fulfillment center or forecast
I
here?
think is a forecast adjustment the
I think
best
we're talking
corrective
forecast. Okay,
action?
let me reread that. Now I'm more, okay. If the forecast is within the 20% acceptable window, but the forecast calculated weekly turns versus 4-week and 13-week calculated POS unit turns reflect a substantial difference, is a forecast adjustment the best corrective action, or would a safety stock increase be more effective? Okay, that's a big question. No, that's good. Root cause for forecast inaccuracies, they usually start with in stocks or sometimes overstocks. Root cause before you start even talking to your replenishment manager about adjusting their forecast, that's their baby. It really is. That's the product of what they do, is replenishment, keeping stuff in. First thing is OTIF and in stock. If you have in stock issues, figure out why internally. Make sure you're at or near 100% OTIF consistently, not just last week. You're fulfilling orders on time 100%, because when you start talking about, we've got some forecast issues, you know, it's 30% forecast compared to what it should be or what we're calculating, and you just immediately ask for a forecast adjustment or a safety stock adjustment. The first question from the replenishment manager in reply is going to be, what is your OTIF for the last 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever? Because if you're not filling the orders and getting them to them on time, you're not meeting the requirements of the current forecast. So can't change 3 things at a time. So the first thing is start there, if you're seeing it. As far as whether I would do a safety stock adjustment over a forecast adjustment, I would start with safety stock first. It's a much easier change for them. They're not having to change the forecast. If you're seeing variability issues, like 1 week you're plus 20%, the next week you're down 30%, that is really, really hard to troubleshoot. And that's where just more open communication with your replenishment manager about what in the world's going on can help. But as far as you're consistently 25-30% under forecast or over forecast, safety stock adjustments can definitely take care of that. And that's, you know, it's a conversation with the buyer. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. The old Inform system, we used to be able to make a lot of changes, which was sometimes good and sometimes bad. But so GRS is kind of a black box. It's all controlled by the replenishment manager. All we can see is the output of it. Okay.
You wouldn't mind going to the next slide?
Yeah.
Close this out. Thank you all for all the great questions online. We're toggling to our ending slide. We've got lots of slides, as you guys saw, in the 2 hours. But we have our contact information. We've got Tim at Trend Results. You can find Tim there for any of his live webinars or workshops. I know you've got a lot coming up in this year, as well as SupplyPike. You can find us at supplypike.com. We also have SupplierWiki resources. You can stay informed. I sent a link in the chat, and I'll also make sure people here in person get that. But sign up for our newsletter so you can stay informed about events like these that are coming up, and all the other free resources that SupplierWiki has. So with that, thank you so much, Tim, for walking through this. Very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everyone online. And we're going to close out. So everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.